This is the video for you if you're brand new to using Canva or design in general, and maybe you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and you need someone to help make this not just simple, but also, dare I say, a little bit of fun, because if we're not having fun, what's the point anyway? So if you'd like to learn how to make eye-catching designs like these, while also building your confidence in your content creation skills in general, all within Canva, then get excited because that's exactly why we're here. But before you begin, make sure to go ahead and download the guide that I've attached in the description below, as this is where you're going to find all the handy tips, tools, and resources we cover in this video and beyond. If we haven't met yet, my name is Maggie Stara, and I've helped more than 100,000 of my students master Canva. And I can't wait to share my nerdy passion for this amazing tool with you as well. So thank you so much for being here, and let's go ahead and jump into actually getting to know your Canva space. So let's go ahead and get you signed into Canva or signed up to Canva if it's your very first time using the tool. And you can either use the link I've provided in your course guide for your 30-day free trial of Canva Pro, so you can use some of the more advanced features we're going to talk about, or you can just stick with the Canva free version for now. Now, you're just going to go to sign up, and if this was a cybersecurity course, which it isn't, but if it was, I would definitely say use the continue with email function, because it's just much safer for you to do an email and a password as opposed to logging in with something like Facebook. And I would use as an extra step something like LastPass to store all your passwords, so that you're not trying to remember 200 passwords, or you're not using the same password for 200 different logins. And that just makes it really nice and easy for you to have a secure password and make sure that you never lose access to your Canva account. So essentially, this is just going to look for the address that you put in there. If it's not associated with a Canva account already, it's just going to help you create a new one. Then once you are logged in or you're signed up, you're going to see your Canva dashboard. Now, your actual dashboard is likely going to look very different to mine, just because it is a brand new account potentially. I have thousands and thousands of my own designs and my students' designs that have been shared with me that I may not necessarily be able to edit, but I can view them for my students, and that's all been added to my Canva dashboard. So if it looks a little bit more overwhelming than what you're seeing, that would be why. It's also because I'm using Canva Pro, so we're going to talk about some pro versus free features as we go along. But just so you know, if it looks slightly different to yours, that would be why. But once you're in your dashboard, one thing I wanted to point out is in the bottom right hand corner, you always have this Ask Canva option here. So you can click this question mark at any point and ask Canva anything that you might be getting stuck with, or you might be having trouble finding. This is a really handy resource for that. Then you also have your account settings in the bottom left-hand corner. So these used to be in the upper right-hand corner if you're ever watching kind of different videos from past versions of Canva and it's in a different spot. It's just because it's moved. Canva likes to move things. But this is where you're going to manage things like your billing, and also your accessibility features, which also includes the look and feel of your Canva dashboard. So me personally, I generally design everything in my Canva dark mode. It's much easier on my eyes, and I just prefer the look of it because it makes my designs stand out a little bit more. And because I'm working in Canva for hours and hours at a time, it's just much easier. But for this demo purposes, we're using the light version, but this is where you can change that. You can also change things like contrast, and all of those sorts of settings can all be done within here. This is where you can also invite people if you're using your Canva with other team members and things like that. So then we go back to our Canva dashboard, and let's just talk about a few things that are on the left-hand side here so that we can start to get a bit familiar with where everything is. So starting with our projects, this is a really key function of Canva if you're working within Canva a lot, because this is how you get really nice and organized. As I said, I have thousands and thousands of designs within Canva, and if I didn't have my projects section all set up neatly, it would be an absolute mess. So this is where you go and you create folders, and you can create folders within folders. You can upload files. You can even import folders from your computer. So if you've already got a folder that's got, 10 different folders within it, and it's all nice and organized on your computer, you can actually just import that straight into Canva as it is. But this is where you get nice and organized within your folder structure. And you can obviously have subfolders within your folders. You can also upload your images in here, upload your videos in here, and organize all of that in bulk. It's much easier to do that from within the project section in your dashboard than it is within the editor. It's still accessible from within the editor, but it's just a little bit more fiddly. So just so you know, if you need to organize anything, this is where you go to do that. Templates we're going to talk about next, so let's leave that for now. Brand is largely a Canva Pro feature, so it's not something that you're going to utilize a lot if you're a Canva free user. On the free version, you can only have one brand kit and it can only have 3 brand colors and not much else. So it is a little bit limiting. It's probably not something that you're going to utilize as a Canva free user. If you're on the Pro version, however, you can have lots of different logos. You can have all these different beautiful color palettes. And I am going to talk about why I have so many different versions of my color palette. But then you've also got your fonts, and as a pro user, you can also upload your own fonts. So you're not just limited to the fonts within Canva. And you can do things like your brand voice, which is a bit of an AI feature. You can upload your photos so that they're really easily accessible, all within your brand guidelines, and do all sorts of really cool things. So it is largely a pro feature, probably not something you're going to utilize a lot as a Canva free user. Then let's talk about Canva AI. So Canva AI has a few different versions or different ways that you can access it. You might have noticed it when we're in the actual main dashboard. There's also your designs, templates, and Canva AI up here that you can search directly from within the search bar in your home screen, or you can actually just access it in the left-hand sidebar. Pretty much takes you to the same place. So there's some limitations to this. Obviously, you can do lots of things. You can design logos, you can create images, you can create documents, you can even code within Canva, which is awesome. At this stage, it's still a little bit of a limited feature. It's a nice starting point from time to time. So let's say I want to create an invitation. It's going to design it for me, and I'm going to say create an invite for my 35th birthday party on the 3rd of December at 10 Smith Avenue. The theme is jungle. Let's see what it does. So this is going to create an invitation for me that's actually editable within Canva, which is quite handy. I've found that unlike if you were doing this with a real designer, if you're doing this with an actual human, you might say, oh, okay, can we just change this one photo to be slightly different? With AI at this stage, it tends to change a lot more than what you're asking it to change. So you might say, oh, can you just change this one thing? And it'll just sort of drastically change the whole thing. So that can be a little bit limiting, but as I said, because these are actual Canva designs, it's sometimes just a nice starting point where it has all of the different details that you've put into it, and then you can go into the editor and continue editing. So obviously, these have taken various approaches to the theme of jungle. I probably wouldn't, say join us for a wild 35th birthday celebration and then have like a kid's birthday party. Maybe I would, honestly. I don't know. But either way, it just gives you a really nice little starting point, and then you can go and click the little pencil icon in the bottom right hand corner and keep editing that as a design. I do definitely use the AI features within Canva for generating images, both within the editor and from the dashboard itself, but it is a much more advanced feature, and you do have a lot more access to it as a Canva Pro user. You have some limited functionality access as a Canva free user. So if you're really interested in exploring this feature further, I've provided some additional resources for this in your course guide. Now, in terms of apps, this is something that we are going to look at a lot once we're in the actual Canva editor, because it's the same. You've got Canva apps in the editor, you've got Canva apps in the dashboard, but essentially this just allows you to access all of these various different tools that have been integrated with Canva, so that you don't necessarily have to go to this app and then pull information or images or videos from that app and bring it into Canva. It's all been integrated really nicely into Canva for you. So we're going to explore that a lot more once we're actually designing. But for now, in the next lesson, let's jump into the templates function and talk about how we can actually customize some templates and some things that would be nice for you to know. So much like with everything within Canva, there's always going to be a few different ways to get to the same place, and templates are no exception. So when you're in your home dashboard, you can always click on templates and search for templates here, and it's going to allow you to search for things like print products, social media posts, and then you can go by particular categories, or you can go to create and do the same sort of thing. So you can say, I would like to create an Instagram post on the theme of a restaurant. Or in here, you can also create a custom size template. So if you've got something that's really specific in terms of the width and the height, especially if it's for print work, so if it's not necessarily in pixels, which is generally reserved for digital files, let's say it's a document in inches or in centimeters, this is where you would put in the width and the height and then create a new design specifically with those dimensions. Otherwise, you can also go to the template section in the left-hand sidebar, which allows you a little bit more flexibility in terms of the filters that you can apply, which is my preference, but again, there's always a few different ways to get somewhere. So in here, you can search for, as it says, thousands of templates. Let's say we are just going to look for something like a template for a restaurant. And at this stage, it's showing us everything. It's showing us presentations, it's showing us Instagram posts, it's showing us YouTube thumbnails, and everything in between. So we've got 20,000 templates that have the keyword restaurant. And that's a little bit much. So now we want to either go by category where we go, okay, let's only look at Instagram posts, or we actually look at the filters function and we can have a look at a few different categories here. So if you can't find what you're looking for here, you can just search for it. So for example, if it's for something like LinkedIn, we would just search for that here and it would pop up with that. But let's say in this case, we want to go for an Instagram post, and we want it to only be that nice vertical Instagram post. We want to avoid any square templates because it's going to give us the most real estate on the platform. Let's say we don't really want to identify the style at this stage or the theme, but you could also say, okay, I want to look at animated templates only, or ones with videos in them only, or you can also actually filter this by color. So if you know specifically your brand colors are a particular hex code, which is that nice combination of 6 letters and numbers that make up a specific color, you can put that in here and it's going to pop up with that particular brand color and only show you templates that feature that color. That's not obviously not perfect, which is why it's got these kind of more broad categories. So let's say we only want to look at templates that are kind of roughly in the theme of red, and then we apply that, it's only going to show us restaurant posts that are a vertical Instagram post format and feature the color red. So that's a really nice starting point. And then we can have a look at a few different things here. So one of those things is going to be whether it's a free template for us to use if we're a Canva free user, or a pro only template. So you can tell this by determining whether there's a little crown in the bottom right hand corner that will tell us whether it's a pro feature. So it's not going to allow us to access this if we're a Canva free user. So we would want to look for a template like this one, which is available to everybody. And the other thing is the bottom left-hand corner, you might have a little play button icon, which will tell you that there's something in this template that's animated. It could be animated text, as it is in this case. It could be a video in the background or something that's moving in that template. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't download it as a still image. You absolutely can, but it's just telling you that it's got a little bit of extra flair to it. But of course, this is a pro feature, or this is a pro template, so we wouldn't be able to use this one if we're on a free plan. And then the other really nice thing that you can do with your templates is actually save them for later. Because sometimes you actually really do not remember how you got to a specific template. You're like, what did I search for? Did I search for puppies running through a field to get to this one? It can be a bit messy. So that's where the starring feature can really come into handy. This is a really, really nice way to kind of make little collections of templates that you really like, whether you're doing this for a client or for your own business, and then you can always access them in the starred content section to use for later. Now, one caveat I would probably put on this is that this is a mistake that a lot of especially new Canva creators make, which is that they start with a brand new Canva template every single time they sit down to create social media content. And what that means is that you end up with, especially Instagram, you see this on Instagram a lot, you end up with an Instagram account that is 20, 30 different Canva templates that haven't really been customized to suit a particular brand. All that person's done is maybe change the text, but they haven't changed the colors or the fonts to make it really feel like it's their own, and it can look really messy. So that's where branding and the concept of branding and actually making sure that each template that you're selecting, you're customizing it to your own colors, your own fonts. It all looks nice and cohesive. That can be really important so that it doesn't look really disjointed, because when you're looking through Canva templates, there are 20,000 different designs made by thousands of different designers, and they're all very, very different. So if you're using a new template every single time, it's gonna look a little bit messy. So I would definitely recommend either starting from scratch and just taking inspiration from Canva templates, or just making sure you're definitely customizing it to make it look like it's your own every time. So for the next lesson, we're going to be using this particular template here that I've pre-selected. It is in the dimensions of 1080 by 1080 pixels, which is actually no longer the ideal dimensions for Instagram. So we're going to change this, but it's also a bit of a learning point for us to know that you don't necessarily need to feel like you're stuck with whatever template you choose in the initial point of your design process. You can change the dimensions, so you can resize, you can change the template, you can change the colors and optimize it to whatever you need. It's just a bit of a starting point. So we're going to click on customize this template, and next we're going to have a look at the actual Canva editor. So within our editor, the first thing we want to do is actually rename our design, because this is going to make it nice and easy for us to be able to search this. So in this case, I'm just going to say Instagram post, but obviously I want to be a bit more specific than that so that it's really nice and searchable for me within my Canva dashboard. Then as you're editing things, no matter what it is, you'll notice that Canva automatically saves every change. If you're online, if you're offline, this little bit will say you're offline. Help. Basically get back online, so that it can auto save everything for you. So just know that you don't have to actually manually save anything. Then you've got the undo and redo function, or you also have the keyboard shortcuts there for you. So if you prefer those, Canva will always help you out by actually showing you the keyboard shortcuts for everything, which is really nice and handy. Then we've got the resize functionality here. So as I mentioned, these are not ideal dimensions for Instagram anymore, this square dimensions. So we would want to resize it. Now this used to be the best way to do it, especially for Canva Pro users, because it's not available to Canva free users. But it's really only the best option now if you have a document with multiple pages in it that you want to all resize at the same time. So let's say this has 100 different designs in it. They're all square, and I want to resize them all to these 1080 by 1350 dimensions, which are just that little bit taller, which makes it really nice and easy for Instagram now that it has slightly different view options in terms of the grid being slightly taller. It's just no longer optimal for square posts. So if I want to resize all of my pages all in one go, and I'm a Canva Pro user, I would utilize this and then basically say, these are the dimensions I want to resize to, or I would search for the actual dimensions that I want. And then I would either copy and resize it, or just resize the design, and it would nice and easily basically take all those designs and make them vertical for me instead of square. But the thing is that largely you're probably only going to ever really be resizing 1 or 2 designs at a time, in which case it might be easier to use a slightly different functionality that's newer within Canva, which allows you to do something similar but all within one project document. So if you look at the 3 dots in the upper right hand corner of this page, if we click on that, it's going to have this resize page function, which again is a Canva Pro only feature, but it'll allow you to basically take that page and resize it into different dimensions, but it's going to keep it all in one document. So that's going to make it really nice and easy for you to basically have a LinkedIn post, a Facebook post, a YouTube channel banner, all in one document. And that's really handy, especially if you're working with team members or with clients, and you can go, all right, for this new particular promotion that we have coming up, I've designed all of the materials for it, and it's all within this one link, and they can approve all of them or give their comments on all of them in one document, as opposed to you having to send 10 different links. So that's really, really handy. It is a pro feature. A way around this though is instead of adding a new page here, if you were to add a new page, it's basically just going to give you a page that's in the same dimensions as the previous page, which isn't all that helpful because that's another square page. So instead of adding a new page, we would say add a page type, and then we would go to either social media or we would just search for it. And then in this case, we want the Instagram post 4x5, which is the 1080 by 1350. It's going to create a blank page with those dimensions. And now we can go ahead and basically just click, drag, and right click and copy all of this across. Or if you would have noticed, you can also use the keyboard shortcut here. So because I'm on a Mac, it's telling me Command C is the shortcut that I want to use. If you're on a PC, it would say Control C. And you want to copy that across, go to your second page, and then once again, we would right click and either paste here or use Command V, which is on a Mac again, Control V if you're on PC, and paste those into this next or new dimensions. And then we can kind of size things down until it sort of makes sense. And that's a really easy way to do that, even if you're a free user of Canva. Now, as I was sort of adjusting things on the page, you would have seen these grid lines kind of coming up, these pink lines in the middle and also the center of the page and in other parts of the page. These are essentially just little guidelines that Canva used to tell me that I'm in the middle of my document, or I'm in the center of the document, or I'm somewhere within a boundary of that document. So at this stage, you'll be able to see this pretty much beautiful center and middle line, that pink line that tells me I'm exactly in the middle point of this document. And now I can let go and it's nice and beautiful, and it's kind of aligned to the center. There are other ways to do this. So for example, if I wanted to make sure this bowl by itself was in the center of this page, I would just right click and go to align to page and say, I want this in the center and in the middle, and it would align it for me there instead. But I can also just click and drag and wait for these little pink lines to come up to tell me, okay, you're in the middle and the center of this design, somewhere here. It's a little bit tedious, but yeah, somewhere around there is pretty much the middle and the center of that design. So these grid lines are basically just there to help you out, to tell you this is where the center is, or this is where some sort of boundary is. Those are never going to show up on your designs, and they're also going to act different depending on the project type that you're in. So at this stage, as you'll see, as I'm moving it, it's telling me there's 111 pixels in this case above and 111 pixels below this particular element. So if I was in a print file, let's say I was in a business card file, this wouldn't be in pixels, it would be in inches or it would be in centimeters. So the numbers that you see on your screen will depend on whether you are designing in inches, in pixels, in centimeters, or whatever else. Largely, you'll probably be designing in pixels, so that's why you'll see those numbers. But the numbers will pop up to basically tell you this is how far away you are from different elements on the page, and it's going to make it really nice and easy for you to design according to how you want to space things out. But you can also ignore those things completely. They're just there to help you out. If you're like, I don't really care how this thing is aligned, whether it's in the center, I just want it in the place that I want it in, then feel free to ignore them. They're just there to help you out. And next, let's talk about the file functionality within your editor. So this is where you're going to be able to access things like Canva's built-in accessibility feature, which is really handy if you're not super familiar with how to design things for color contrast, for example. So you're like, I'm really not sure if people are going to be able to actually view this thing. Is there enough contrast between my elements? Are the fonts too small? Canva can essentially do those checks for you, so you don't really have to do the guesswork. So within File, you can go to Accessibility and check Design Accessibility, and Canva is going to tell you if there are any big design flaws that it can tell that might need to be corrected before you go ahead and download this design or share it online. Then you have the option to also move your design to a folder. So once again, we want to keep nice and organized. If this was an Instagram post for a particular client, this particular restaurant, I would move it to their particular folder and maybe move it to a folder of that client, and maybe there's a subfolder in there specifically for Instagram. This is where I would go ahead and do that. Then I can also, this is not actually the best place to download it. We're going to talk about downloading a little bit later, but this is where I can also delete the document, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually used to be quite a pain to delete things within Canva. So it's great that this is now functionality specifically within the editor. But just know, if you do accidentally delete a file and you still have time to recover it. So if I was to, let's say, move this to trash, it's then going to say, all right, you don't have access to this design anymore because it's in the trash. And I'm like, what happened? How do I get it back? From your dashboard, at any point, you can head on over to trash, and then you can rescue your design by going to the 3 dots in the upper right hand corner here, and then it's going to tell you, do you want to restore it or you want to delete it completely forever? So in this case, I want to restore it because I want to continue working on it. So if you absolutely can't remember where it went or what happened, it's probably in trash, and this is how you would go and recover it so you can continue working with it. And next we can talk about how to bring in pages from your other designs into this particular design if you ever need to. So if we go on over to projects here, and as we're talking about this also, I did want to mention that if you hover over anything in the left-hand sidebar, you'll notice that this menu is kind of hovering, but it's not really staying in place. So as soon as I go away from it, it's going to hide automatically, which can be a little bit annoying for some people. So if you just want it to permanently stay in place, just click on anything in the left-hand sidebar and your design will automatically shift a little bit to the right, and then this will be permanently in place unless you click this little arrow icon, and then it's going to collapse. So if you wanted to permanently stay there, that can be a little bit handy. And then I can search for any design that I've ever created or go through my folders. And then let's say in this case, I'm going to create a new page, and I can bring in a page from a different document. So this is a baby shower template that I'm working on for Etsy, and I can just go, all right, bring this into this design, and it's going to bring it in, and it's also going to automatically resize it to the dimensions of this particular post. Now it's not perfect, as you can see around here. I would have to probably stretch some of the design elements to the sides because they're not quite to the dimensions that I need them to be. But really, just a couple of small tweaks here will allow me to bring it into the dimensions of this particular page and then work within this particular document. So that's all about projects. The other options we're going to cover next, but I did also just want to mention that at any point in the bottom left-hand corner here, you'll see this little sparkly icon, which is your quick actions guide. And this is where you can also search for things. So if at any point you're like, how did Maggie say I get to finding a circle or finding a text box or something like that, you can always go to quick actions or use the keyboard shortcut, which is this backslash that it's telling me about over here. And you can just go and search for it. So you can be like, I'm trying to find this, and it's going to tell you exactly what you need, and it's going to allow you to really quickly click on it here and bring it into your design. So you don't necessarily always have to remember where things are within Canva, because Canva's here to also help you out a fair bit. But yeah, that's one that I use quite a lot, especially for things like the accessibility checker, for example. You know, I would otherwise have to go to File and Accessibility and find it there. Instead, I can just go to Quick Actions and find it right here. So that can be really, really handy. And next, we're going to actually have a look at how to add elements to our page and how to work with them in the editor. Okay, so let's now work with our original design, but we're going to change this slightly, and it's going to be for an Italian restaurant that I've made up. Let's call them Maggie's Pasta Place. That sounds fun. So we're going to adjust this template to work for Maggie's Pasta Place and talk about a few things along the way. So I would probably just delete a couple of elements here by clicking delete on my keyboard. I don't think we need the pricing here. I might leave this, but it's going to be talking about spaghetti, probably. I would delete these brush strokes. I don't think I need them. I don't think I need the order now call to action here. And I'm probably going to remove this as well. So I just want it to be quite minimalistic. Now, as I said, you're not stuck with the template that you've chosen at the beginning. At any point, you can go to design and change this to a totally different template using pretty much the same functionality as we did within the dashboard itself. That doesn't mean that you can't just add these in as a new page either. So you can use them as a reference and just go, all right, let's add a new page. And there's something about this particular template that I really like, so I'm going to bring it in just for inspiration. And then I can keep going down that path and keep adding in templates that I can draw inspiration from and not necessarily utilize. But just so you know that you're not necessarily stuck with the template that you choose, but in this case, we are going to be using the template as almost like a really nice starting point. If we were to be in the restaurant business and we like something about maybe the fonts of this template and we like the overall layout, but we just want to tweak things a little bit. So instead of changing the actual template design, we're going to go to elements and we're going to look for pasta or spaghetti or something like that. And now I have some options. So at this moment, it's sort of showing me a little bit of everything in terms of videos, photos, graphics, even audio, or I can use this panel here to kind of go and find exactly what I'm looking for, which in this case would be in the photos section. And you'll start to notice that a lot of these do have that pro icon. So this is a little bit annoying, but on Canva's free version, you don't actually have this filter function to say only show me free templates. That's largely because they want you to upgrade. If you're a Canva Pro user, you do have this functionality, but you probably utilize it a lot less. So it is a little bit annoying, but if you are a Canva Pro user, you can filter this down by free and pro templates. If you're a Canva free user, you just have to find photos that are free for you to use, or you can utilize some of the free image resources that I've provided in your course guide as well. So I would just try and find a photo of something that looks like spaghetti or pasta bolognese, because that's kind of the theme I'm going for. And then I have some options in terms of how to get this nice cutout look. So let's say I like this photo. It looks like it could be bolognese. If anyone actually knows, please don't hate me. I don't think it is, but anyway, we're going to pretend that it is. Now, as a pro user, I can do something really cool with the background remover feature, which will allow me to just isolate the plate and remove everything else. So that makes it really nice and easy for me to work with this. Of course, that's not available to everybody. So we're going to pretend it's not available. I'm going to undo that and just use my actual photo. And I already know this particular template has something in it called a frame. So what that means is if we go into elements, you'll notice that over here, we also have the option for frames. These obviously don't have the shape of pasta, but let's say I want just a circle frame. I have all of these various frames that are essentially just waiting for a photo to snap into it and take the shape of that frame. So let's say this frame is not exactly a circle, it's like a blob, but then I can take any photo and snap it into place and it's going to make it into this shape. And then I can always double click into this and move it around and also size it up or down to make it fit that particular shape. So obviously this is a bit awkward. I want it to be a proper circle, but I already know that this particular design has that frame in it. So I can just use the frame that's already there. So I'm just going to right click on this frame and say detach image, because I don't actually want this wobbly shape frame. What I want is I want to snap it into place of the frame that's already there. So it's going to automatically do that for you. You don't have to do any manual work to make it work like that. If there's already a frame on the page, you can just put a different image in it and it's going to snap it into place. And now once again, I would just double click into it, move it around and size it up or down and try and find the spot where the plate kind of looks like it's in the frame. So that's a really nice and easy workaround. Obviously, this was a pro image that I'm using, so I'd have to use a Canva free image in order for that workaround to work for me. But if you don't have background remover, there's always little ways that you can get around things. So that's one way that we're going to design this and change it to our specific dimensions and our specific needs for Maggie's pasta place. And I would probably change this to a different call to action, something like come and try our special bolognese sauce. And Now that I'm using a little text box, so obviously this text box was already in the template itself. If it wasn't there and I just need a new text box, instead of the Elements tab, I can go to the text function here and bring in a text box instead. So if I just click on that, it's going to bring in some text that I can manipulate, but because I was already in the template and it already had some text on it, I can just use what's already there. So I'm going to delete this. And now I can just use the little circles here in the corners to kind of size this up and down. And as I do this, you'll also see these numbers change here. So what that means is I can either manually do this with the text box, or I can actually just use this and change the font size here instead. Then I can also manipulate the actual size of the text box. So for example, at the moment, this is on 3 lines. Maybe that doesn't really work for me. So I want it to just be on 2 lines, and I can use the little kind of guides on either side of that text box to stretch it out or bring it in. And I think that works pretty well. I might actually try this just on 1 line and make the text quite small. I'm not sure if I want it bolded, so I might change that to non-bold. But you can always play around with so many different text effects here. So similarly to the way that you would have it within Google Docs or other softwares, you have things like bolding, italicizing, underlining, strike through, all caps, basically all the things that you're probably already familiar with. Not every font is going to have every function available. That's something to note. For example, this particular font is already slightly slanted, so it means that the italics function is not available, which is totally fine. But just know that some fonts will have the option for you to make them bolder, some fonts won't. So if you're seeing some things grayed out, that could be why. And one additional thing you can do that's Canva specific is use the effects panel here, which will allow you to access some really cool additional effects, things like drop shadows. It does work better with bolder fonts than it does with something as little as this, but just so you know, there's a few things for you to play around with there. In this case, I probably wouldn't utilize those functions, but I will utilize the curve function because I kind of want this to curve around my plate here. So it might actually already be pretty much where I want it to be, maybe a little bit smaller. I can play around with the curvature so that it perfectly sits right around my plate. And then I would probably use these little arrows here just to twist it to the side to make it a little bit more nice and interesting. I think it would just be nice for it to not be like perfectly in the center. So that's just another cool little thing where you can utilize the effects panel for that. So now I'm just going to click and drag so I can resize a few of these things so that my pasta dish is much more prominent because I think it deserves the real estate. And I'm going to bring some dimension to this post by adding in an element here. So I'm going to go to shapes, or I could search for it up here, but in this case, I'm going to want to bring in a little bit of a square. And I'm just going to click and drag and resize this so that it comes just underneath my text there. And now I'm going to right click on it, and instead of aligning this to the page, I'm going to use the layers function to send this all the way to the back, so all my other elements are going to be brought to the foreground. So I think that already looks pretty good, but obviously this color doesn't quite work for my purposes. I thought it might be fun for us to go to the color panel and actually select a color that's already in my existing brand colors, because I think it kind of matches the bezel in this quite well. So it could be a fun color for us to use. And then we're going to pair this with a nice light color. So I'm going to be using this post as almost a customer review. So I'm going to go back into Elements and I'm going to look for customer review. But instead of looking for a photo, in this time, I'm going to be looking for a graphic. So within graphics, I can now look for, again, free graphics if I'm a Canva free user, or in this case, I'm happy to use the Pro function. And this is already kind of the colors that I want to be using, so it's pretty close, but I'm going to change it. I'm actually going to invert these colors. So graphics don't always give you the functionality to change colors, but in this case, it's giving me the option, and I know that because the colors are up here. So this green can be changed to whatever color I want. In this case, I'm going to change that to a pink, but it's going to be more of a purpley light pink. Yeah, I quite like that. And then the actual pink is going to be changed to my dark green so that it's almost it's inverted the colors in a way. Okay, so now my text here has completely gotten lost because it's dark on dark, but I'm going to be utilizing a little speech bubble to kind of showcase this little review. But I want that speech bubble to look like it's coming from the top down because a lot of speech bubbles are in the other direction. So I have come up with this search term, which is speech bubble top down. And this is all the normal regular speech bubbles, but I want something like this. And then you'll see Canva coming up with some magic recommendations based on the one I've selected. So I selected one of the only ones that's top down, but now it's going to tell me, okay, these are similar to the one that you've just selected. So it makes it really nice and easy for me to continue searching through a few different ones that are similar to what I've just selected. And I quite like this one. So I'm going to select that and move it to just underneath where it says customer review. And now we can play around with our text a little bit. So this is going to say, best pasta I've ever had. And this is going to be, yeah, I'm just being funny. Look, I would love it if restaurants had more of a sense of humor in their social media posts. So I thought it'd be really funny to have a testimonial from someone's nonna that works at the restaurant. So the actual testimonial itself is probably going to be bolded and much larger. So I'm going to increase the font size of this. And then the rest of the text is going to stay quite small. But perhaps I would actually bold all of it and just see how that might look. Maybe leave this bit unbolded. Yeah, I think that works. I might just have to size this down so it's not super crowded. Now, in order to kind of align this, I can actually just use the arrow keys on my keyboard to shift this slightly to the one side until it looks like it's in the center of that speech bubble. So I think that already looks pretty good, but now we're going to have a look at how we can add even more dimension to this post. So let's talk about how you can add some extra flair to your graphic, even if it is just a static graphic like this one. So this stage, we've got a nice bit of texture in the background here, but it's lacking a little bit of depth and dimension in the bottom with this solid rectangle. So I thought it might be nice for us to continue this speckled background all the way to the bottom. So we're just going to stretch this all the way to the edges. And the first thing I would do is actually change this color. At the moment, it's a dark gray, and I would just change that to our brand color here. Now, it hasn't made a huge difference there. And the reason for this is likely that if we zoom in, the transparency of this has probably been adjusted. So there's a transparency option here. At the moment it's set to 20. If it was set to 100, you'll see that speckle really pop, but it's a bit distracting. So I think we can sort of meet in the middle at around 40 there. I think that works pretty well. So we can use the slider to zoom back out. And now we're going to copy this and paste it and make it lighter so that it pops against that dark background. So we can right click and copy and right click and paste, or use the keyboard shortcuts there. And then we can snap these on top of each other so they're directly on top of one another. Canva will help you out with that. So you don't have to feel like you're going to go pixel by pixel and try and find the right spot. Canva will snap these into place because they're the exact same dimensions. So it will recognize that you're trying to kind of put them on top of each other, and it'll help you out. But at this stage, obviously, all it's really done is it's put this on top of all of my other elements, and it's put it on top of my review, and it's a little bit messy. Plus, it's still a darker color, so I need to make sure that that is adjusted to a light color here, and that it's placed behind those initial elements. So there are two ways to do this. Obviously, we can right-click and use the layers function, but it's going to get a bit messy because of how far down we want this to sit, because we now have so many elements on the page. So the easiest way to do this is, instead of using that function, we go to position instead. So position has a few different functions here. It does have that same layers function where you can just go back by one layer at a time. You can send it all the way to the back. You can send it forward. You can also align things on your page, but you can also access this actual layers panel here and manually drag it and change how everything looks on the page. So that can be really handy if, for example, I want to select this shadow behind the play, but it's an element that's 5-6 elements down. It's really hard for me to manually have to shift everything to the side to select that one thing. So you can go to position, go to layers, and automatically select an element that's way down on your graphic. Because otherwise, all it's going to do is it's going to select the very top element. So as soon as you try and click on anything on your graphic, it's just going to be looking at that top one because it's so large in this case. So what we want to do is we want to move this all the way behind all of our other elements, but on top of that rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and move this all the way down. And this one, I know it looks transparent, but that's actually our initial speckle. We want this to be sitting on top of that white speckle so that that color pops a little bit more. So I think that's already done a pretty good job of creating some depth there. But we're going to use one more hack that's quite cool that I utilize within Canva quite a lot, which is to bring in a gradient rectangle as opposed to a solid color rectangle. So we're going to go over to elements and just make sure that we're looking at shapes, and we're going to bring in a rectangle over here. Now we don't want it to be pink in this case, but essentially what we want to do is we want to change this color. So we're going to go to our color panel, and we could just select a color over here, but you'll notice that this says solid color, and there's also an option for gradients. So this is already pretty cool. You can play around with gradients. There's so much you can do with it. But if you then go through to selecting a new gradient color, you can add additional gradient parts of your gradient, or you can just adjust the colors that are there, but you can also adjust them in not just color, but also in transparency. So this is something that I utilize a lot to create depth in my graphics, but also when I'm using just pure photos in the backgrounds of my graphics, it's nice to place a gradient on top so that I can add a bit of text without feeling like that text is overlapping with any background objects in that photo. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just going to actually set both of these colors to black, and then one of them is going to be transparent. So this is the top color here. I'm just going to go ahead and move the slider down, and you'll notice that that background color pops out because this is essentially just now completely transparent. And I can move this around, and I'm just going to bring it to about there because I'm going to add a little bit of text to the bottom there. So again, I need this to be in the right spot on my graphics. I'm going to go to position, and I'm going to click and drag this all the way on top of my rectangle there. And now it's created an extra bit of depth, which is really quite cool. Now I probably want to move this up a little bit. So once again, instead of clicking and dragging, because that's going to select a whole bunch of elements that I don't really want to select, I'm going to just click and hold down Shift and select a couple of elements here, and maybe just use the keyboard arrows to bring this up a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to add a little bit of a call to action at the bottom there, and I can either go to text and add a text box, or I can hit T on my keyboard, and that's going to do the same sort of thing as a nice keyboard shortcut. Obviously at the moment it's just not the right color. It's very, very dark, so I want to use the text color option here. And is this the right pink? No, this is the right pink. And I'm just going to bold that as well, just so that it's nice and stands out. And I'm going to say something like just $8 every Tuesday, because let's say that's a special we're running. So I think that looks pretty good already. I might use my arrow keys, and then I'm just going to right click and make sure that that's in the center. I think it's a little bit off. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Now there are two more things that I want to cover in this lesson. One being a drawing function. If you ever want to add some extra personal flair to something like a presentation, for example, and you can't quite find the shape you're looking for, or you just want to draw something for whatever reason, then you can head on over to the left-hand panel here, and you can utilize the tools function. So the tools function has a few other capabilities in there, including drawing shapes, lines, sticky notes, adding text, adding tables, but largely you might utilize it for the drawing function here. So you've got an eraser, you've got a highlighter, you've got a marker, you've got a pen. Let's say we're just going to use our marker function. I'm just going to leave it on red, and then whatever weight the actual marker is fine, because we're going to just actually delete this. So This allows you to just click and draw any shape that you want. And while I'm still drawing, it's not going to recognize it as its own shape, but as soon as I exit out of this, it's going to then convert that into its own shape. So at this stage, what I did with that is I drew the line, I let go of my mouse, and then I drew another line. So that's one option. Then what you can do is just kind of hold your mouse down, and let's say we draw this arrow in one continuous motion. So I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm going to show you how that acts a little bit differently depending on whether or not you let go of your mouse. So I'm going to close that. And now you'll be able to see that because this was one continuous motion, it's treating it as one object, whereas this was two strokes. So it's essentially acting as two separate elements, which can be a little bit messy because obviously we want that arrow to be treated as one element most likely. So if that ever happens and you just want these to kind of be together, then what you would do is you'd hold down all the elements that you want to combine. In this case, it's just two, and then you'd hold down Shift and just make sure that they're both selected or they're all selected. There we go. And then Canva's already going to be telling you, do you want to group these together? Which will allow you to then treat this as one element, just like you would on this side. And then you can change the color, you can change the transparency, you can treat it as you would any other element that you take from the Elements tab. So that could be a cool thing. Obviously, it doesn't quite suit our graphic here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those. But just so you know that that tool's functionality is there, and it can be quite handy for specific parts of Canva. Now, lastly, I wanted to talk about apps. So you'll notice that my left-hand panel here has some other lots of different options here that you may not be seeing in your own editor. And that's just because apps will essentially add whatever app you're accessing to your left-hand sidebar unless you choose to exit out of it. So for example, I was using this translate function. If I don't want to use it anymore, I can just exit out of it, and then it's going to basically bring it back into the app section. So we're going to go ahead and use something called Magic Media, which gives you access to some AI tools directly from within your editor. So this is something that you have access to even if you're on Canva's free plan. You will just have way less credits than what I have here. So the moment I have one out of 496 credits. That seems like such an obscure number, but anyway, that's what it is, I guess. So if you're on Canva's free plan, that's just going to be a little bit more limited, but you still can utilize this function, which can be really handy, especially for example for this. We found an image that is pasta that's top down, but let's say it wasn't exactly the right sort of positioning of the plate for me to work with the frame. So I could either go through painstakingly trying to find a photo of the right pasta sauce with the right angle of the right dish that looks nice, or I could actually just AI generate it. So I'm just going to go ahead and in the three dots over here on my page, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to duplicate my page so we're not messing with the original design here. And we're just going to prompt this to say, make me a round pasta or round pink plate of spaghetti bolognese, which is probably more traditionally what people associate bolognese sauce with. I'm still not sure that's bolognese sauce by any means. I don't think it is. I mean, it could be. Anyway, let's just leave it at that. And then I could say the shot is taken from the top down, because this is important for me to be able to fit it inside of that round frame. And in terms of styles, I would want to make sure that this is set to photo in this case because I want it to look natural. And I'm happy to keep that as square, but if I wanted to change that to portrait or landscape, I could do that as well. And now I'm going to hit generate. So while we're waiting on that to generate, I did also just want to mention that if I was doing this for an actual restaurant client, I would want to make sure that this is a photo of their food and their plates, not AI generated food. But because this is for my own fake restaurant, it's okay. I feel okay about it. Okay, so it's generated a couple of images. I think they're all pretty good. This doesn't look all that appetizing, but the plates are really cute. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one, and we're just going to snap it into our frame. And I'm just going to double click into it so then I can stretch this all the way to the edges here and line that up. Let's see. Yeah, I think that looks really good. actually, I think I prefer this color to the color that I chose for this. So I'm going to adjust this. Obviously, if this was my brand colors, I wouldn't mess with it, but because it's not, we can adjust things a little bit. So over here, this pink, instead of just choosing a color or using this slider and trying to painstakingly figure out which color this is, I can use this color dropper tool and then just pick a color from the actual photo itself and adjust that to what this already is. So I'm gonna just actually pick a lighter version over here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And then I would just adjust my text down here to match that same color. So that's already looking pretty cool, but next let's talk about how we can bring this to life even more with some animations. So while I just set up this design using all of the same functionality that we've already talked through, I did just want to mention that animated posts are just not right for every design. If you are going to be creating a resume, for example, or any materials for print, you of course wouldn't be animating anything because it wouldn't show up in the right way. But for social media designs, this can be so powerful, and it's not just limited to platforms like Instagram. It can even work for something like LinkedIn, for Facebook, for so many other platforms. This can be such a cool functionality for you to explore. So I did just want to cover it, and we're going to talk about a few nuances of how to leverage Canva's powerful animated features. So now that we've set up our design, let's go ahead and actually look at where to find animated elements. All right, so let's head on over to the Elements tab, and I'm just going to search for Italy. And in the filters, I'm going to be using the animated functionality. So this is not going to work for things like photos. It's only really going to work for graphics. And then you want to look for, or at least I want to be looking for, a Canva free elements, so they don't have that pro icon, but also something that's called a Lottie. You don't necessarily need to know that. All it really means is that when I select this animated element, I know that it's going to allow me to edit it to my color scheme. So that may not be important for every single design that you create, but for me, for this one, I would like it to be in my brand colors. I would like to be able to edit it. So I would be looking for elements that have this color panel that shows up, which means that I can change those colors. If that color panel doesn't show up, so for example, I think this one, it's obviously a pro element as well, but it doesn't have that color panel that shows up. There's nothing there, which means that I can still use it if I'm a Canva Pro user, but I can't adjust the colors at all. So that can be a bit of a limitation. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm just going to be selecting ones that I know are going to allow me to edit the colors to make it nice and matchy with my beautiful design here. And just going to move things over here. So look, if I was running an Italian restaurant / cafe, this is a joke that I would make. You know, this is a $3 espresso, but $5 for people who pronounce it espresso. I think that is a reasonable charge. So this is a post I would totally make. And I think adding a bit of humor to your posts on social media is not necessarily a bad thing. So now we can go ahead and basically try and match the colors to the colors that we want. So this kind of khaki green doesn't quite work for our brand here, so I would match that to my peachy color. I could probably keep the brown as is because it's a coffee color, but I think in this case I am actually going to change that to my green because people still know it's coffee. And then down here we've got a few different colors to play with. So I think this yellow is really distracting me. I would still use our brand color, but just make it a couple of shades lighter so that it stands out against the background. And this coffee cup can be our peachy color. And then our actual coffee here, I would probably use the color that we already have, but maybe go a few shades darker in this case, actually. Oh, that's too dark. Around there. So I think that works. And I would probably match the coffee here to that same color. I think it was this one. Or was it this one? Either way, I think that works. I think that already works pretty well as is, but I think if you want to add a little bit more depth and a little bit more texture, there are a couple things. So obviously this animation is not currently on top of the text, so I think it would be cool to make it look like it's the person's actually diving on top of the text. So that just comes down to the layers, and I would just right click And in the layers function, I would just bring that to the front so that it looks like it's actually diving over that text. And now what we can do is bring a little bit of extra texture to this. So I'm going to remove the animated option here, and we're just going to look for coffee and pattern to see if there's anything else that we can add to this to make it a little bit more interesting. So there are some coffee beans here that I think would be quite cool to add to this design. And hopefully these are editable colors. Yes, they are. I can see the color up here, which means I can edit it, which is cool. So I would change that to our green. I will probably adjust the transparency a little bit. The brilliant thing with pattern graphics like this is that they're designed to fit into each other, which means that when you put them next to each other in whichever configuration you put it in, it's going to match the pattern. So you don't necessarily need to stretch it to the entirety of the graphic. You just need to put them next to each other, which is quite cool. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to go ahead and right click and copy and right click and paste, and then put this right next to it, and you'll see that the pattern here matches seamlessly. Now, obviously, at this stage, it's distracting. We need this to be on top, which is fine. But for now, I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to highlight both of them and actually just group these guys together and adjust the transparency so that it's going to be just really slight in the background. And now let's go ahead and actually just move that layer all the way to the back. Maybe let's adjust the transparency even more. I just want it to be really, really slight. And now we're going to duplicate that for the bottom section and bring it and make it light. So we're just going to go ahead and right click and duplicate. And again, it's going to essentially match the top pattern. But in this case, we might need to actually ungroup it to adjust the color because it's not letting me actually adjust it as a group. So now that it's ungrouped, I can go ahead and change the color, and we can either go white or we could go pink. I don't think it even really makes a difference. I think the white probably looks a little bit better. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and group that again, and we need to make sure that it's sort of behind some elements but not others. So I'm actually going to go to position in this case so that we can make sure that it's not underneath this rectangle element. Now obviously things are a little bit messy because this area down here is much taller than the top area. So I can't really readjust the sizing of these beans without messing with the actual alignment. So there are a few things I can do. I think in this case, I would probably just adjust my graphic and then maybe bring this up and make it quite thick. See how that might look. I think that looks all right. Yeah, I think that looks okay, but I don't love it. I don't love it. Okay, I'm going to reverse that. Okay, so it's close, but we need to play around with it a little bit just to kind of get it to a point that it makes sense. I think that call to action makes the most sense if it's really nice and little at the bottom and doesn't have this bulky sort of block around it. So I think let's go ahead and shift a few things. So here's a few things that we can do. So essentially we need to bring all this down without interrupting this up here. And we need to probably adjust the sizing of those beans to make it all make sense. Okay, so we're going to probably just head on over to position. And so at the moment we've selected this grouped layer. And if we hold down Command if we're on a Mac or Control if you're on a PC, you can select various layers from within here. So I'm going to select these two layers and I'm still holding down Command, and I'm going to select this layer over here as well. And now if we size all of this up, it should allow me to kind of bring it in line here. And then I just need to adjust my text to make this all make sense. Yeah, I think that's going to look a little bit better. So that bottom panel is just going to be nice and thin. And maybe we just need to adjust the sizing of our animated elements here. Bring this down a little bit. maybe make it a little bit larger. So that's one way to animate your posts. This would probably work best for something like Facebook rather than Instagram, because on Instagram, this would automatically get converted into a reel format. So you want to make sure it's in the right dimensions for that. But for something like Facebook, this would work really, really well as a little announcement to say, weekend's coming, we've got this special coming up. Make sure to come and check it out. And then you could export this as a video or even a GIF for Facebook. So that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But for now, let's actually talk about how to make things in a reel format and also add some video elements to your posts. So I've had a bit of a think about it, and I'm actually going to change these colors to be much more pink. Still like a really nice light pink, not sort of a really bright pink, but I think this kind of peachy color, deep peachy color, doesn't really work with my chosen green, and I quite like the green, so I want to keep the green. So I am going to just change these a little bit, and then also change the yellow in the espresso machine or espresso maker to be a color that's a little bit more on brand for me. And this is a really powerful lesson to learn in terms of branding, because I talk about this a lot in all my courses, which is that sometimes you choose the colors for your brand and then you go to actually use it in your designs and you realize those colors really don't work well together, or you just don't like the look of it. And sometimes you need to adjust. So it's really nice to be able to actually go back and go, maybe I was wrong. Maybe we need to go in a slightly different direction. And because this is a fake brand, we can do that. So I've adjusted it now. I think that looks much, much better. And now we can talk about how to add some video elements to our designs. So we are going to be doing this in a slightly different format. So instead of just adding a new page, I'm going to add a new page type. And we're going to be adding in a social media video in this case. So it can be a story or a reel, doesn't really matter. We're just looking for the dimensions really, which is 1080 by 1920. It's going to be this nice vertical post. This is really hard to see, which is also why I really like designing in dark mode in Canva, because it's hard to actually see your canvas. Sometimes I'm just going to change it to pink so we can see the dimensions here. And this is going to make it nice for either an Instagram story or a reel, which can go on Facebook, it can go on Instagram, it can go on other platforms. And now we're going to add some video elements. So one thing I wanted to mention before we head into that is how to actually edit both videos and images. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for pasta here. And we're going to just add in a photo, even though I know we're not working with photos, but the principle will be the same, because I realize we haven't actually talked about how to edit images and how to crop them and how to adjust those sorts of things. So there are a few things that you can do here. You can either just use the sliders here to kind of crop your image vertically and horizontally, or you can use the actual crop function here to do this in a much more sort of freehand way. So that's one thing in terms of cropping. But the other thing that you're probably going to utilize a lot more is in the edit section. You can go and do so much. I'm not going to go into every single thing that you can do here, but largely I want to look at the adjust section here. So this will allow you to adjust things like contrast, which is specifically going to be powerful for images that you take yourself. If you're importing any iPhone images into here, chances are they're not going to look that great before they're edited. So this is where you can go in and actually adjust things, have that nice desaturated look, that black and white look. If you don't feel confident in doing your own adjustments in the adjustment panel, you can go through the filters as well. So this almost gives me a bit of a early days of Instagram vibe, if you remember, like Valencia. So it's a little bit like that, where it just adjusts it using a filter. So the moment it's black and white in the adjustments panel, so they're not going to be able to see the filters. I'd have to go and remove that first. But it does also have some black and white filters in here as well. So you can go through and just adjust things according to the filters, and that can be a nice, powerful way to do that as well. The reason I wanted to cover that is because I'm about to do it with the video as well, and I just wanted you to know that it is possible with your images as well as videos. All right, so we're still looking for pasta, but this time let's go into the video section of our Elements tab. And because this is a nice vertical canvas, I'm going to go ahead and use the filters function and only look at vertical videos. So I'm looking for a nice background video. something that's not really distracting, because I am going to be putting text on top of it. So if you hover over any of these videos, it's going to give you a little quick play of what that video is, so you can see it and see if it's really busy or not. I think these kind of nice slow-mo videos of pasta will work. I think that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to edit it much like I just did with the image that we had. And once again, we've got filters here for videos as well. But in this case, I'm just going to go to adjust, and I'm just going to desaturate this so that it's just nice and black and white. And I'm going to make it more transparent so that it picks up the background color of my canvas. So at the moment it's pink. I think I'm actually going to go with a dark background color. So I'm going to go with my green here. And now I can either stretch this out to the edges, or just easier, I can right click and just go replace background. So now if I click into my video, I can adjust the transparency down, and it's going to bring in that nice green in the background. If that was pink, that video would now be pink. So whatever the background color is, it's going to bring that to the foreground. And that's also why I've made it black and white, the video itself, because it picks up that background color a little bit nicer than if it stayed yellow. If you combine yellow and my background color, it's going to give you a bit of a different weird vibe. So sometimes it's nice to actually just make your videos or your photos black and white so it picks up that background color in exactly the shade that it's in. Now, the other thing I would do is mute this if it had any volume. It doesn't, so I don't have to worry about that. It's also 35 seconds long, which is probably a little bit too long, so I would probably trim this, especially if it's for something like Instagram Reels. Probably only need this to be about 10 seconds. So I can either use the slider, or I can just say, give me a 10-second clip, and then I can adjust this. I can grab it and find the 10 seconds of the video that I want to use. But because this is a relatively neutral video, I don't actually care which 10 seconds it's using. So we're just going to go ahead and leave that. I'm actually going to desaturate this even more, or sorry, I'm going to adjust the transparency even more because I want that background color to really pop. And now I'm just going to either bring in a text box, or once again, I can hit T on my keyboard to bring in a bit of text. So I can say something like, our $8 Tuscan Tuesday is coming. Ooh. Are you ready? So super, super simple. I'm not really, it's not award-winning copywriting by any means, but it's just something that I could post to say, hey, this thing that we are promoting every week, or, you know, cheap pasta Tuesdays, it's all coming up. So just as a reminder, get ready. And then that's pretty much all we need to do. We can add a little bit more dimension to it though. At this stage, all it really is a video with some text. We can't really play them together side by side very well because currently this is kind of a mishmash project. So this actual document has both static graphics in it, it has video graphics in it. So it's not quite set up for us to play the video again and again and see it in its full glory. So I would click on the duration section down here so that it will actually show me the timeline of that video, and I can then go ahead and play that. So if I'm going to be adding in any additional animated elements to this especially, then I want to make sure I'm in duration here, and it'll tell me, all right, this is a 10-second video clip, and now I can just go to the start of this and hit play, and it'll show me kind of how it's going to appear when it's coming across someone's feed. It's a little bit laggy, but that's just because Canva's trying to process a lot of things, not necessarily because the video is faulty. But I think that looks pretty good. I would probably adjust the sizing of my text, making sure it's not too close to the edges, but just so it's nice and visible. And let's go ahead and actually add in some pasta elements in the graphics section in the top and the bottom here to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'd probably say something like pasta outline, maybe. I think this one looks good. And let's try and find one that's similar to this. So I might go through the magic recommendations and see if it's come up with any other different pasta shapes, but that look like they would match this one that we've already selected. No, I think that's a bit too thin. So when I'm trying to match pasta shapes, or not necessarily pasta shapes, when I'm trying to match two elements together, what I'm looking for is a similar style. So for example, this one has quite thin lines as a drawing, but they're not nearly as thin as some of these other ones. So for example, this is much, much thinner. Then there are other graphics like this that have really thick lines. So for them to be on the same graphic together, on the same video together, just would look a bit weird. Obviously, these are all drawn by different people, by different artists. So trying to find two elements that look like they're in a similar style can be quite tricky, but you're just looking for a little bit of consistency. So I think these two, if we kind of size them up like this, they aren't necessarily drawn by the same person, but they look like they could be in the same sort of collection in a way. I think I'm using the wrong peak there. Yeah, I am. So that's essentially all I'm looking for, is just, do they look like they're relatively similar and could be part of the same sort of collection of images. So it doesn't look like I've picked completely random images that don't look anything like each other. And I'll just adjust the transparency down a tiny bit, and I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to just collapse this. And now we can have a look at how that appears. One other thing that we could do with this is we could animate the text. So we could make the text animated if we feel like it's not moving enough, or there's not quite enough movement. We could animate the text, or we could animate these graphics. So let's have a look at animating some of the text over here, and going to animate, and just adding a really slight animation here. Maybe this burst one. It's nice and gentle, and I'm just going to animate that on enter and make it really slight. I think that works pretty well. Yeah, so I quite like that. I think that's a really nice, subtle animation. It's not so overpowering that in 10 seconds somebody couldn't sort of grasp what's going on. And also, speaking of the 10 seconds, the reason that I would mute that video is because I would probably be adding the music natively within Instagram. You can also add music tracks from within Canva. It's much harder because a large part of them is limited to Canva Pro users. And the other thing is that it's harder to find kind of viral tunes. It's much easier to do it within the app itself, but of course you can find audio within Canva as well. So you just do that like you would anything else within the Elements tab. You would, let's say in this case, we want to be looking for something Italian, maybe, and we would go to the audio section. Yeah, so it's got a filter for this. So we want to make sure we clear that. And then it's going to basically find any music that matches that. But you'll see largely this is all pro tracks. I don't know that there are many free tracks in the audio tab. So that's why it's nice to actually export your video muted and then just add the music in natively from the app. And that has a much better chance of success in terms of viral content and making it look native to the app anyway. So that's a bit about our video posts, and next we're going to go into how to actually download and share your designs. So now it's time for you to share your designs with the world, and you've got a few options on how to do that. So you definitely want to go to the share icon in the upper right hand corner, and then you would head on over to download. With this particular image, obviously there is no animated elements to it, so we would just select the file type of PNG, which is best for your digital images. And I've added some kind of guidance in terms of the file types into your course guide and when to use which one, but Canva's also pretty good at helping you out with that in case you ever get stuck. The rest of these are pro features, so we can talk about it in a little bit, but for now, I would just leave everything as is. And then in terms of the pages, these are the pages we have in the document. So we've got pages 1 through 7, but I would just say, let's just download the current page as an image. And if you ever get confused in terms of which one to download as an image as well, you can always rename them, which might make it easier rather than just going page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can go through to your actual page and go to the 3 dots in the corner, and then you can say, all right, this is the pasta post. Let's say you have 100 different pages within your document. This can make it really nice and easy for you to actually just select the right one. So we'd go to share and download, and in here, if you were to scroll down, now it says page 3 is our pasta post. So you definitely can make sure you're selecting the correct one. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on done and download that as a PNG. So while that's downloading, I did also want to mention something. If you're ever downloading multiple images at a time, which you might do because you might be designing 4 or 5 images and you want to download them all at the same time. So let's say we want to actually download image 1, 2, and 3. It's going to download it as a zip file. So let's go ahead and just hit download, and I'm going to select all 3 of these and make sure we're on the PNG file type. And I'm going to download that just so I can show you how that appears in your download folder. So that would be the first thing. It's just really straightforward. These are just flat graphics, so there's no reason for you to change the file types. Now it gets a little bit more complicated with images or creations like these that have some moving elements. There are some that are straightforward. For example, this one will definitely be exported as a video file because it's in this nice vertical format. It'll work really well for a story or for a reel, but either way, it has to be in MP4 or video format. But this one is a little bit more niche because there are some platforms that will accept GIF formats and some platforms won't. So for example, platforms like Pinterest and Instagram wouldn't accept this in a GIF file format, but you would be able to post this as a GIF on something like LinkedIn and Facebook. If you're ever not quite sure, just download it as a video. It'll work best across all the platforms, but there are definitely some platforms that do accept GIF formats and some that don't. So sometimes it just comes down to experimentation, or you can Google it if you're ever not sure. But I would just download this as a video and go into the MP4 here. So MP4 video, it'll actually tell you it's suggested, but just so you know, you do have the option for this to be a GIF as well. And we're just going to download the current page, and I'll also download page 7 as a video as well. Now, if you're going to be selecting 2 different pages that have videos in them and downloading them at the same time, I would definitely suggest ticking the option for download as separate files. And I'll show you what I mean. So we've selected page 4 and page 7. We want that to be video. And now it's going to say, do you want to download that as separate files? This is only an option for Pro users. If you're not a Canva Pro user, all you would really do is you would just select page 4, download. Once that's downloaded, you go page 7, download. So it's just a little bit quicker to do this as a Canva Pro user, where you can go, all right, select pages 4, 7, 14, 25, and download them all as separate files. It's just a little bit easier, a little bit quicker, but it's not really a huge hindrance if you're on Canva's free plan. So we're just going to go ahead and download those. And now I did also want to mention that sometimes you have maybe 20, 30, maybe 100 plus pages in a design, and it can be really hard to know what's going on where. Obviously, renaming your pages is a really good first step, but sometimes you just need to have a bird's eye view over things. So I've actually opened another document that has 23 pages in it, so we can have a look at how this appears when you can have that nice bird's eye view. So if we go into our grid function here, I can see all of the pages really nicely in as a collection here. So what that means is I can kind of take note of where things are, and maybe I go, okay, I want to download pages 1 through 4 and then 12 through 14 or what have you. And this gives me also a chance to maybe shuffle things around, especially because this is a course guide for my signature Canva course. So I want to make sure that the pages are in the right order. And maybe this is a way for me to look around and be like, oh, actually this one's supposed to be over here. And I can move these around before downloading this as a PDF file. So the grid view is really handy for that. And it allows you to then go to share, and you could go to PDF and select only the pages that you want to be selecting, because you've had this nice sort of top-down look at what pages are in your document. So now I'm just going to open my downloads folder so we can have a look at how everything downloaded from within Canva. So this is just our pasta post. So that's just downloaded as an image. Looks good. And then these have downloaded as zip files. So what that means is you have to double click into it to open it up. and same with our video file. It is a bit of an annoying step, but that's just how Canva does it. And then the 3 images, 1, 2, and 3 are within that zipped file. And same with this, I downloaded my videos as separate files within the one folder. So that's 1, and my second video is there. So that's just a little bit of a kind of caveat to downloading multiple things at any one time, is that Canva's going to zip the file and you have to unzip it in your downloads folder. But it's not really that much of a hindrance, just so you know. If you're like, where is everything? That would be why. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is sharing access with people. If you want to share your design for review, or, my students share their designs with me for projects and assignments a fair bit. So we would go over to share, and where it says only you can access, you would just change this to anyone with the link, and probably can either comment or view. So you don't necessarily want to give them the permission to edit your design, because then if they make any edits, it can be hard to go back to your original format unless you're handing it over to them to edit permanently. But otherwise, I would probably just say can view, and then copy this link, and they'll be able to view your design, maybe tell you if there are any changes that need to be made, and without actually affecting the design itself. So that's pretty much it in terms of sharing your designs. Now, depending on where you're based, you also have the option to print with Canva for specific design files. So for example, things like business cards and flyers, those are all things that you might be able to print with Canva by using the print with Canva option. If you're not seeing it there, you would just go to see all, and down here you've got print with Canva. Again, not available in every country, and some countries are limited in terms of what you're able to print, but I've had really positive experiences with that option. You do also have the option to share directly to social. I'm not going to go into that too much at this stage, but I don't utilize that function a whole lot. There are some limitations to how that can be used with Canva. My preference is always to download my design so I know exactly how it looks, and then manually upload it to the social media platform of my choice. So that would be my recommendation. But definitely feel free to explore Canva and its various options on your own. And of course, I've also added the links to the designs that we've created here in your guide, so you can have a look at them and revisit them later if you wish. Next, let's also just talk about some additional Canva Pro features that you may want to explore if you're on this particular plan. So up to this point, we've already discussed some Canva Pro features and the benefits of being on a Canva Pro plan, but I did just want to reiterate that it's not a be-all and end-all. You can definitely utilize Canva's free features if you're only planning on using Canva once or twice a month, or maybe even less. You can absolutely get away with not using their Pro functionality. It's still a very user-friendly tool on their free plan. But largely it does come down to kind of little shortcuts and having the tools integrated directly within Canva, rather than you having to kind of hunt around the internet for a few different ways to do something. You can just do it all within Canva. I did just want to cover one more Canva Pro feature that I utilize a fair bit that saves me a fair bit of time in terms of customizing Canva's templates to your own needs. So let's cover that, and then let's discuss some other additional next steps afterwards. So in here, I just searched for the word modern, and I'm in the presentation category, and we're just going to go ahead and select one of these to customize so I can show you what I mean once we're on the inside. So you'll remember within my brand kit, I had a few versions of my color palette, and this is just a really neat little hack that you can do when you have your color palette set up. So within my brand kit, I've got all these various versions of my color palettes that are essentially just, this is my main color palette, then I've got one without the black in it, I have one without my neon color in it, so that I have a few different variations to pick from. So I could apply this to this template from within here, or in the presentation section, I can also go into design and go into styles, and then I've got my brand kit here, and I can just go, all right, let's apply my color palette from here, and then I can keep on clicking on it to find a color combination that I like. Once I find it, I can say, all right, apply that to all the pages, and you'll see down here it's applied it to all the pages within this template. So all 12 pages have now been branded with my brand colors, and I can do the same thing with my brand fonts here. So it's not always going to be perfect because I would probably go back and capitalize these, but I can just go ahead and go, all right, apply that to all the pages. And now all of the pages within this template have my brand colors and my brand fonts. And it's just a nice way to kind of shortcut my way to success. The other thing that is quite handy that you may not be utilizing, which would be to share your design as a template. So if you go over to share and not necessarily brand template, I would go to see all, and you've got this template link option. So this is something that you might utilize if you are looking to sell your templates or give your templates away as a free lead magnet or something like that, where people will basically be able to take your design and make it their own, but your original design remains untouched. So the only way you can do that is if you're a Canva Pro user. Those are just some handy functionalities. There are lots and lots of other benefits to being a Canva Pro user. Largely though, it does have to do with workflow. So for example, even just having access to all of the pro elements in the photos and the videos and the graphics within Canva saves you potentially hours of having to hunt for those elements outside of Canva, and also making sure that those elements are free for you to use because they're licensed for you to freely use in your designs. It can all just take a lot of time if you're designing frequently, but you have to decide what's right for your unique situation, and you may decide that this just isn't quite necessary for you, and that's totally fine. But just know there are some really cool features and functionalities to being on the Pro version, so definitely feel free to test them out. Also, just remember to look out for the little crown icon whenever you're navigating around your Canva dashboard, which will tell you whether this is a Pro feature or not. All right, and next we'll talk about some next steps on your Canva journey. Congratulations on getting to this point. I hope you're feeling really proud of yourself, and hopefully you're feeling very energized about the creative possibilities of Canva, and you're filled with new skills that you didn't have at the beginning, hopefully. And if you'd like to expand your skill set past the point of the material that you've learned here, I've also provided some other free resources for you to check out in your guide. But then if you want to challenge yourself even further, I would definitely recommend checking out my signature Canva course, where we take everything that you know up to this point and elevate it so much more by exploring so many more amazing topics within the Canva world, like how to choose the right fonts and brand colors for your content creation, how to create powerful animations for infographics, apparel, skincare, and even how to create disappearing gifts and advanced product ads, how to create professional business cards, a custom animated email signature, amazing posters for print, and even how you can use Canva to create a website that you can use to conduct surveys, collect emails, book appointments, and how you can create professional polls and quizzes, and so much more. So if that's something that interests you, I've added a link to this in your guide, and I hope to see you there. I really hope that you enjoyed hanging out with me and learning a bit more about Canva, but just remember, as cheesy as it sounds, and I don't love the saying, but practice does really make perfect. Learning is just such a small part of the journey. The doing, the scary bit, is the most important part. That's how you turn knowledge into skills. So without actually practicing the skills that you've learned, they're not going to become skills. It's just going to be information gathering, which is something we do a lot as adults. We gather information from every avenue, but we forget to take the time to do the actual scary thing, which is the practice thing. And it's the vulnerable thing, because we're not used to having to suck at things. It sounds so brutal, but it's something that we do a lot as kids. We have to constantly be bad at a new skill because we're acquiring so many new skills. And then we become adults and we just forget how to be bad at stuff. So the more that you can put yourself into that vulnerable state, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to share your designs with anyone out there. You don't have to post them on Instagram. You don't have to share them with your newsletter or your friends or family. You just have to actually practice a little bit. And the best way that I found to do that in the early days was actually to just pay attention to the designs around me and take screenshots or take photos when I saw a cool billboard and go, I wonder if I can make that in Canva, but maybe with a different business in mind. And just challenging yourself to do that, because that's how you're also going to get super familiar with additional tools in Canva, because you're going to be like, oh, well, I don't know how to do this. I wonder if you can do this. Then you're going to Google it, and Google's going to say, yes, you can do this in Canva, and here's how you do it. And suddenly you've discovered a brand new app or a new tool that you didn't know about. So just customizing Canva templates or making your own templates from scratch is a really good place to start. But actually just going, ooh, this flyer that popped up in my mailbox, I wonder if you can recreate that in Canva. I know it might seem really weird because we're so used to doing things with a purpose. And technically this is almost like a purposeless exercise. You're like, I'm creating a flyer for a fake business, and what's the point? But the point really is just to get that muscle moving and those skills, get you to acquire those skills through practice. So if you can set aside 20 minutes, half hour every week or every 2 weeks, whatever your unique schedule and your unique situation allows, to do the practice bit, which is the scary bit, then you're gonna shortcut that learning curve so much more, and you're gonna get to be an amazing designer so much faster than I ever did, because I didn't also have anyone teaching me this stuff. So hopefully I've been able to help put you on the right path to success with your Canva journey. And I've really enjoyed having you here. So hopefully you really enjoyed it as well. And I hope to see you in another one of my courses again soon.